Welcome to the Dental Journeys podcast, proudly sponsored by Whitecoat Financial. Join us as we explore the journeys, strategies, and successes of dental professionals across Canada. Whether you're a brand new grad or a seasoned dentist, our episodes aim to provide advice and insights for your journey in the dynamic world of dentistry. On today's episode, we have none other than Dr. Avi Patel, aka the Clear Aligner Advisor. Dr. Patel grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and eventually attended the NYU College of Dentistry. After practicing for a couple of years, he was feeling burnt out and stuck, which led him to expand his scope of practice to aligner therapy, which eventually led him to teaching courses and consulting other dentists online on how to do the same. Dr. Patel is now the CEO and the founder of Clear Aligner Advisor, and he spends his time creating content and courses for other dentists facing the same struggles that he faced early in his career. I think so many of you will resonate with Dr. Patel's message, and he's such a great example of the different journeys that you could take in dentistry. So without further ado, let's dive into episode 5 of the Dental Journeys podcast. I guess where I wanted to start really was the come up of where you were, pre-dental school. Where'd you grow up? What was your family situation like? If you don't mind talking about it, did you have siblings? Did you have the traditional Indian parent to you got to go and become a doctor and that's why you went into dentistry? Maybe you could guide me a little bit about what life was like growing up and then what inevitably led you to dentistry. Was it a personal choice? Was it family? If you can shed some light there, that'd be awesome.
So basically, journey for me, when I was young, I'm the oldest of 3. I got a younger sister, younger brother, and I was not always the smartest kid. I was smart, but I wasn't ever the smartest. I always liked doing things outside of school, so like sports and stuff like that. And I originally actually wanted to be an NBA player. I was convinced that I was going to go to the NBA because in middle school, I was one of the taller kids and I enjoyed playing basketball. But, high school came around and I stopped growing and everybody else kept growing. And so that's when it was like, all right, I need to probably do something else. And yes, that's where the traditional Indian kind of parenting kind of came in, where they did a good job for me. Like my mom and dad of just framing it, right? They were just like, you need to think about what kind of life you want in the future and, essentially work backwards. But which is great. And I give that advice to other people as well. And that's usually where I stop. Where my parents didn't stop is they're like, so pick between lawyer, doctor, dentist, and or finance, right? And so at that point I was like, all right. So I started kind of looking around. My uncle, he was a dentist, and so I shadowed him and I pretty much saw everything that he was doing. And at a young age, I realized that he had 3 things that to me seemed worth pursuing, right? He had a career which gave him time because he was not working 6 days a week. He was working, maybe I think 3 or 4 days a week. He was making good money. He was traveling the world with his family, had a nice house. And I could also tell when he was working on his patients, he was helping people, right? They valued what he was doing. And so that sense of fulfillment to me, I was like, hey, this seems like something that's worth, going after. The other thing was medical school, right? Or being a physician. And so the story I like to tell is, when I was shadowing him one summer, he had a dinner party, and at the dinner party, he was having a great time with his friends. And then one of his buddies was talking to me. This guy was a neurosurgeon, and he was just like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And that's when we talked about it. He's like, well, you got to decide if you want to go to medical school or dental school. And so it was at that point where I realized, I was like, well, why? I was kind of like, why aren't you hanging out with everybody else? Right? Why is this guy talking to me? And that's when he told me it's he was on call that night. And so I was like, oh, okay. So in that at that point, I was just kind of just all right, he's a neurosurgeon, great profession, I'm sure, very rewarding. But if he, is not even able to kind of have these moments and spend time with friends and whatnot because he's working technically, I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go the route of dental. So dental's also shorter, right? 4 years after college. And so, yeah, I at that point I was like a junior in high school, and so I was focused. I went to college, graduated in 3 years, got into NYU, and graduated from NYU 2018, and went straight to practice. And I was practicing in Connecticut for 2 years. And then during the pandemic, we moved. My wife and I moved down to Austin, and so that's where we've been now for the last 3 years.
Interesting. It seems like, yeah, you knew pretty early then you're going to go into dentistry. And if I'm not wrong, you really value, I guess, freedom, so to speak, because to not go into like neurosurgery or into medicine, it seems like, if I'm not wrong here, the driving force was, I don't want to be on call. I want to be able to spend time, and have weekends. Funny enough, when you first started, that probably wasn't the case. So we'll come back to that. You're probably like, oh man, joke's on me. But leading up to that, while you were in, let's say, doing your degree, did you have any deviance of, okay, I might want to go and do another profession? Or was it like, as soon as you got into post-secondary, you're like, I know I'm going into dentistry, there's nothing else?
Yeah, I think I just had the blinders on, and I was like, I'm going to go into dentistry, and I always knew that I wanted to like be great, right? I wanted to be great at what I was doing. And so that, to me, looked different at different phases. So while I was in dental school, you only know what you see, right? And so for me, this like pinnacle of success and this pinnacle of greatness in dentistry that I saw was cosmetic dentistry. And so that's where I was like, okay, cosmetic dentist, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. I was never actually like a creative person with my like hands, right? Like I played sports, but I was never like, that part of my brain was never enabled or really encouraged. I don't know why, but so this whole, as I'm learning about like cosmetics, and it's like, oh, it's an art form, and there's a whole bunch of techniques and stuff. It was definitely something where I was like, well, like I'm sure I could learn that, right? But I don't think it ever really came naturally. So that didn't deter me. That's just additional information there. But yeah, so that's kind of what it was. So like when I came out of school, I was in like the, when I was in dental school, I was in like the aesthetics honors program, and that was kind of the track that I was headed for. But when I came out into the real world, it was, first associateship, there was no cosmetics. Like it was a general practice. They were doing your bread and butter dentistry. The owner there actually really was a big fan of root canals. And so I was very much in like a learning mindset. And that's where I was open to always wanting to, at that point I was like, cool, this dream of being this cosmetic dentist, I'll put that on the back burner. Right now, let me just focus on my foundations. Like, let me get really good at the basics, and then I'll grow. Like I bought into that narrative, and I think that narrative is good, but I also think it can be harmful because it can shortchange you when it comes to achieving dreams, right? Because the alternative is like, let's say I didn't. And the reason why I took that advice is because that was the advice that the owner had given me. He's like, hey, I know you want to be a cosmetic dentist, slow your roll. You need to be able to do fillings first. And then, so my advice is like, if you have a dream or you have a goal, like you should be taking steps every day from the beginning to get closer to that. Being good at a basic filling, some people will argue it does or it doesn't, help you become a cosmetic dentist. And the people can debate that. But for me, I think if your dream is to be like this top cosmetic clinician, then you should be surrounding yourself around the top cosmetic clinicians or engaging with them and asking them the questions, right? Like, because if you think about it, I was asking a general practice dentist who had been practicing for 12 years about advice. So his advice, like he's not actually a top clinician when it comes to cosmetics, where if I were to, let's say, and Instagram wasn't really a big thing back then, like for dentists necessarily, but like if I was engaging with these other docs and asking them questions, and if that was my network and starting to like, put work in there, it probably would have been more encouraging for me to go after those dreams.
Yeah, I can see what you mean there, because obviously dentistry is so vast and there's so many different types of treatment. Obviously, you can go and specialize, but as a general dentist, there's so many different types of treatments you can do. It does seem like if you're not specializing and talking to people who are a little bit more niche in terms of the treatments that they do, you could very much end up just being like a generalist, which there's nothing wrong with that. You do your bread and butter of dentistry. But if your goal is not to do that, that might not actually be the best thing for you up front, maybe. Because then you could get lost, and then that goal of doing cosmetics just kind of stays that. You don't get any closer to it.
Nope.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I guess maybe you could tell me a little bit about the early days of when you started practicing. What were the hours like? You mentioned obviously that you were doing a lot of general work, but what really was it like that first, let's say 6 to 12 months of practice? Was dentistry did it live up to the hype? Did it live up to your expectations that you're like, all right, I'm going to do my schooling, I'm going to get through and I'm going to become a dentist? Or when you started practicing, was there some shock of like, oh crap, did I make the wrong decision? Is this what I signed up for? What was that experience like, let's say as, young Dr. Patel?
Yeah, it definitely did not live up to the hype. It was very much a shock because I was thinking I was going to have that dentist life of working a couple days, making good money. No one really made it clear that there is an entire journey that you have to go down before you can even get to that point in your career. And I know I'm not the only person who thinks like that, because whenever I post about it on social media, those posts usually get the most engagement. It's just like everyone forgets to tell you that it's tough in the beginning. But yeah, man, I was working 6 days a week. I was working at a couple different practices usually. I was always in at least two, because my first job, I got let go after like 4 months just because they weren't busy. So to kind of mitigate the risk of having, all your eggs in one basket, I always practiced at two places part-time. And then whichever place would, be more fruitful or more productive or more, just have a better trajectory, then I would like slowly add more days to working at those offices. So, but yeah, like I'd say it was crazy. Like so then after I got let go from that first office, and I have I'm sure you saw them, I have a whole YouTube series on my associateship reflections, but basically I was so desperate to do dentistry because, I was at that office. I wasn't busy. I wasn't doing anything. So I was like, I need to get in people's mouths. So I actually was willing to drive an hour and a half. I bought a car. I was living in Manhattan. I bought a car and I drove an hour and a half north to New Haven, to another state, to work at a Medicaid office and do essentially like high volume dentistry at a very low price. A low fee is essentially what our Medicaid is like. But I did that. I worked like 4 days during the week, and then I did every other Saturday, and then I was also in another place 2 days a week. So it was a lot. Like it got to the point too where like Tuesday nights I would work my shift was from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then on Wednesday morning the shift was at 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so I wouldn't even come all the way back to Manhattan. I actually stayed at my sister-in-law's house in Mamaroneck, and just like, because it was like 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half.
But yeah, there's just this, what you said about with associates, no one really tells you. I see it so much here in Canada because all my clients, everyone I talk to is a Canadian dentist. And you are very much pitched this idea of when you start practicing, first you're pitched the idea of when you get into dental school, it's smooth sailing. Your life is set because the main thing is just getting in.
The hardest thing is to get in.
Yeah, because then you're told this narrative that, okay, once you get through dental school, you're set. Your life's set. You become a dentist. But it's funny because my entire company is kind of founded on the premise of what you just talked about, which is what we call the adulting avalanche. You finish school, you got 6 figures of student loan debt, you're buying your first house, you're buying your first car, you're traveling, you're trying to save and invest, you're paying off 6 figures of student loans, maybe you get married, maybe you have kids. All that kind of happens in like a decade when you finish school. And you're just hit with all these responsibilities. And so I feel a little bit bad, but oftentimes when I'm talking to clients, I'm like, honestly, this is the last thing. And once you finish this period, it's smooth sailing. But life never really is. It very much is, okay, I got a bunch of student loans when you're finishing school. I'm just learning. I don't know if I'm in the right place. Should I start my own clinic? Should I be an associate? You have all these decisions. And then you start working 5-6 days a week. You're not living this dream that you had as, of becoming a dentist. And it's really tough in those early years. I really like your page because you talk a lot about, dentistry, the burnout that happens and the mental health issues that come as a result of that. Were you feeling that same sort of avalanche, so to speak, when you just finished school? Because I know you had $500,000 of student loans, if I'm not wrong, which is insane. But what were you feeling at that time? Was it this exactly as I just described, or was it even worse?
Honestly, I'm an optimist by nature. And so I don't like, even though all these like bad things were happening to me, or these, monumental issues, I kind of like didn't try to focus on it. And I was just trying to focus on what I could control. And at that point, it was like, I would go through phases. Like I would have a job. So I would focus on just like doing my job, trying to get good at it, coming home, decompressing, getting ready to like go and do it. And that was just my life. Like I just accepted it. I didn't like it, but I accepted it. And then if I'd lose my job, I'd be like devastated for like a day. And then I'd be like, cool, let's start the job search tomorrow. And now we know, like, I had like a checklist of like things to look for and not to look for, like, red flags. Cause again, they don't teach you any of that. And so, yeah, it basically was like, cool, like these were the good things about the job that I had. These were the bad things. This is like what I sacrificed on. This is what I want out of the next job. And so that's how I would do my search. And then I would go and I would ask, interview with people, ask questions. And that's how I kind of came up with my own like frameworks basically to finding a job. And so it was crazy because it boiled down to the point where like, it was amazing to me if I was able to like have an assistant and have somebody help me with like, suctioning in procedures, like that level of death. Like that's how it boiled down to that, where, cause I was just doing everything like by myself, not looking for excuses or anything. But yeah, man, when I was in it, I was in it. And I actually wasn't in a dark place, until the pandemic. And that's when I paused and was like, I need to do something else, or like, I need to do more, because this stuff is like, it's getting tiring. It's getting old. And what I mean by that is like the basic bread and butter dentistry. I was motivated to make more money. I didn't want to have to like, I was just getting bored. And that's what I invested in, like taking continuing education to learn implants. And then I also started to learn about aligners, because I was like, hey, there's this procedure that people are talking about. I've heard about Invisalign. Everyone's heard about Invisalign. And I was like, well, I'm not doing it. Part of the reason was because I was just never at an office for more than 4 months at a time. So I was like, if I'm going to, start treatment with somebody for 6 months, like I got to be there. But yeah, then I dove into that. And then that's when everything changed.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question of, if you were practicing for this long, how come aligners never came up? Because I don't know about the sentiment in the States. Obviously, Invisalign and aligners are very big here in Canada. Almost every client that I work with and every dentist I talk to does it if they're a general dentist, or at least like they're gonna start doing it very soon if they're brand new. And so it seems like it was really that pandemic that allowed you to pause and be like, all right, what can I do better? And how can I improve the situation? So when you took the course, what made the change happen so quickly? Because it's not like an overnight thing, but it seems like your life took like a massive inflection point when you started doing aligners in your own practice. What was that change like? Why was it so big?
So I think what it was, there's two things. One, the practice that I was at when I was like, because I didn't take a course, I was watching like the online modules that Invisalign gives. And so I was like, cool, I want to do this. And then the owner was like, I went into to work that week and I had like 5 cases ready to go. Like patients were ready to do it. And I was like, oh, we're just finishing out the logistics. Talked to the owner and he was like, I was like, oh, like, I've got these cases ready to go. Like, can I do it? And he was like, no. He's like, it's not profitable. He's like, you just need to focus on the root canals. And I was like, dude, this is the perfect demographic. Like these patients are in their 30s. They have 6-figure incomes. They all used to have braces. They're affluent, like high dental IQ. They didn't wear their retainers, so they have like it's very easy stuff. And I was like, why not? And he was like, nope, it's. He just had it in his mind that it was not profitable. So I was like, okay. So then that's when we moved to Austin. And so in Austin, it was a small group, DSO, and they had the ITERO, and they gave CE stipend so I could invest in education. And what I learned, one of the first weeks, they had like a webinar, and it was Dr. Christina Blocker. And so she ended up becoming my mentor, and I leaned on her, and I was just like, hey, what can I treat? What should I not treat? And how can I, not hurt my patients? So she kind of gave me the insight on that and helped me set up my cases and started talking about it with patients. And then I think it was just excitement. Like patients were saying yes. It felt good. Money was coming in. I was every case perfect? No, like it was something new, but I wasn't like, I didn't know what to be afraid of because I trusted my mentor. Right. So that just being naive, you kind of just do it. And then I was like, I started over 50 cases in 6 months. So I was like, this is awesome. I was like, this is the dentistry I'm talking about. Like I can see the life. Like, yeah, I don't need to work 5 days. I was working 4 days that time. I was just like, this is good. Like I'm making more money than I ever did. I started like training the team so that way I could, outsource some of the steps in the process. The team was getting excited. Everyone felt like it was just fun. Like we were doing something more than just drilling and filling. Yeah. And then I just wanted to start teaching other docs. So the doctors that I was working with, I started coaching them up. Doctors, like one of the docs, he was like 20 years older, and he was like, oh my God. He's like, I wish I did this earlier in my career. He's like, I can see why this stuff is so good. And, kept doing that. Talked to the leadership team at the DSO because they had about 30 offices. And I was like, let's do this for real. Like, I really like coaching people. And they were like, no, just focus on producing, like just stay in the chair. That seems like a big undertaking. And so I was pretty bummed. But then my wife was like, why don't you do consulting? And I was just like, I don't know what consulting is. Like, what is that? And she was like, you give advice and you get paid for it. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So then I started working locally with docs. They started having success. And so then at that point, I read 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And he's all about taking massive action, having omnipresence. And that book lit me up. And I was like, all right, well, you know what? Let's get the word out. And the best way to do that is to, go on social media because it's free. So I jumped on social media, started posting content. No one was really doing it for this niche and going as like that hard on it. And I started to get people who were interested, and they were hopping on like sales calls with me. I didn't even know how to do a sales call. I thought, I was just trying to tell them about the program. But people were like calling from like Jamaica, Trinidad, Europe. It was crazy. Yeah. And then, as I was posting, that's when my mentor, Dr. Ranesh, reached out, and he was like, hey, I see what you're doing. He's like, have you ever thought about creating a course? And so that's when I was like, no, actually, because everybody who has a course in dental they're older, they're white, just people didn't really look like me. So I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified to do that, right? The imposter syndrome came out. And then and he's like, no, you can do it. And then, I basically trusted him. I set up an online program. And then, ever since then, I've made like tweaks to it, and I've grown it now to like over 140 doctors. And it's allowed me to basically, between that and the social media content, has all allowed me to basically stop practicing clinically and focus on the online business.
Yeah. Honestly, hearing that story, like I love that for you. You were working so hard in dentistry and it's felt like you were just stuck when I was listening to your story. And even when you're on YouTube and whatnot, I'm hearing your story and you just seem stuck, where you would go to one clinic, it wouldn't work out. You go to the next clinic and you were working really hard during that period. And then finally you found this opportunity and the wheels start turning. You're like, okay, cool. I'm getting better, case acceptance. People are excited. They're actually appreciating the work. It is cosmetic. I'm starting to finally do this, and things start bubbling. And it's so nice that you just kept pushing, because you did get a couple no's in there. You're teaching other dentists, you're teaching people at the DSO, and everyone's like, no, just stick to the chair. You could imagine if you're like, maybe they're right. You would have just still been, you would have been happy. But you still would have been in the chair doing, this would have probably become boring. It would have been bread and butter dentistry. I'm doing aligners for everyone that comes in. I'm the aligner guy now at the office, and it becomes a little bit boring. But I love that you've taken the leap and you started to, do the consulting, even though you're like, I don't have a business background, and now having your own course. So just like, as someone who's followed you online, I'd love to hear this story for you. Now, on that note.
Thanks, man. That means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, on that note of doing the aligners, when it started to take off, when did you actually start making content? Because I find that to be a very interesting period where you just start and nothing's really working for you. In your first couple of posts, you're like, what the hell am I doing? That imposter syndrome's really hard. And I know for a fact, I have like tons of dentists who have similar ideas. They want to start a course. Maybe they're a specialist. They want to make courses maybe either for the general public or even other general dentists. What was that initial phase like? Because I would like to talk about what the course is today, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what those first few posts were like, what those first few consulting calls were like. How did you get over that imposter syndrome, as well as what made you keep going while you're going through it and not seeing results initially?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I started posting on social media for aligners specifically in March of 2022. There was even a post I put on my story where I was just like, I'm going for it. And today is it's December 2023.
I really thought you've been doing it for like 4 years.
Oh no, just like a year and now 9 months, coming up on 2. Yeah, it's going to be 2 years soon, which is crazy. But yeah, I had like 800 followers. They were all friends and family, colleagues, all that stuff. And then I started following Instagram growth coaches about people who are, they have their own programs in different industries. And there's literally people who have accounts and they teach you how to make content and like how to make content that provides value, creates an audience, and gives you the ability essentially to sell a product. So I already had the product, right? The product was the program, or at that point it was the consulting. And, to answer your question about the imposter syndrome with content, I think the biggest thing for me is I was just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to like stay true to myself. And that was the advice that I was getting from a lot of people. Like, cause I would ask people who had bigger accounts. I was like, what's the key to growing? How do you do it? And everyone's like, they're just like, be you. They're like, be authentic, be real. And that is what is going to help you grow. And when you hear that, you're just like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, be me. Like, that's like, come on, like, give me something else. But at the time I was also I was in therapy. So I was doing a lot of self-work. I was like getting more comfortable with myself, learning more just about me. And I was in a growth mindset too. So this concept of like being vulnerable and then having the confidence to like share that vulnerability, especially through a medium like social media, it can really push you. And so, I wasn't posting controversial stuff. I was actually posting very like motivational, empowerment stuff. So like no one was like bashing me in the beginning. No one was really like watching or like liking, but no one was bashing. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take advice from the people who have done this before. They say, don't look at the numbers, just keep staying consistent and do it. So I did it. And I kept doing it. And like with anything, the more you do it and the more that you're willing to learn and tweak, the better you get. And I slowly just stayed consistent with it. And eventually kind of created like this content machine now where before I was like making videos like 2 times a week. every week. No, I was making two to three times a week. I was making like, I was doing batching in that way, but like all short form, like grab a trending audio, point on the screen. I was doing the dances, I was doing all that stuff, but I was just giving value, because everyone's like, if you give value, it will attract your, your ideal audience. And so I was like, cool, I'll do aligner tips. And so I just started sharing tips. And then, then I found out about making a content machine where you can basically sit down, record one long form video, and then you can have that cut up into short form pieces. And so kind of built that out earlier this year, and have been tweaking that and improving it. And I'm still very relatively, in my opinion, early in this like content kind of space. That's what it feels like, at least, but it's exciting, and it's fun to kind of build in this like digital space.
I'm actually very excited for you. I didn't realize March 2022 is when you really like went 2 feet into this. That's crazy. Like, honestly, hats off to you. That's crazy growth in, not even like 2 years yet. So I'm very excited of what year 3, year 4, year 5.
I forgot to answer that part. The page popped off only in June 2023.
It's usually how it goes. That's
I went from
usually how it goes with any sort of content or any sort of investment. Even like from a financial standpoint, it's like at the end is when you start actually seeing the fruits of your labor. And the funny thing is, you're not near the end. So we can only imagine what 5 years, 6 years, 10 years will look like. But it takes a long time to actually start seeing some growth.
Yeah, it's so true, man. It's so true. And like, going from 800 followers to 1,000, it took a little bit of time. Going from 1,000 to 2,000 took like a couple months. Going from 2,000 to 4,000, even more months. And then like I was in that 4,000 to 6,000 range for like almost a year, or maybe 8 months or so. And then, and then in May, I switched the content up, and I started talking more about the problems in the field, and being more authentic about some of the experiences that I had. And then the page caught fire in the summer. And then I started doubling down on that style of content of just literally walking around, like sharing my thoughts. And then it started to grow. Then I think I went from 8,000 to 10,000 in like a day. And then I was literally getting like 1,000 followers a day. It was nuts.
That's actually crazy. I actually do want to come back to some of the content, but before I do that, let's backtrack a bit, because I want to talk about you now as like the CEO of, Clear Aligner Advisor. What do you do today? And what kind of courses do you actually offer to people? Do you still do any individual consulting, or is it solely the course? But I'd love to hear more about your company, what you guys do, how you help, and who you service the best.
Yeah. So basically, the Clear Aligner Advisor, it's an online aligner education platform. We have one main course. It's called Aligner Launchpad. And that is an A to Z comprehensive clear aligner training program. So there's, it can be applied to any and all brands. So, if you're doing Invisalign, great. If you're doing Sure Smile, great. It can be applied to everything. And we basically, the target doc is a doctor who is literally, you could know nothing about aligners. You could know a little bit, but it's to take you from, 0 to 100. But while keeping it all very, digestible, very simplified ways of, hey, these are cases you should do. This is what you should not do. This is how you talk to patients. This is how you get acceptance. This is how you should schedule. These are the instruments you need to know. This is what your team needs to know. And there's basically, it's a combination of video modules, downloadable resources, and then we actually have a portal where doctors can upload cases, and myself and my team gives feedback. So we'll actually critique the case and give that support. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is today. I don't do any more one-on-one aligner coaching. I really focus on this the online program because I just believe it's the best way to get the information. Because dentists are busy. Dentists, it's hard for them to schedule time. I'm sure you know, and it's between practice and life after. And that's the thing is, I'm not trying to be a time suck. I think the value in this program is the fact that I've trimmed all the fat. There's no fluff. It's just what you need to know. So it's, and to me, like I personally value it. And I think because, right, like I don't need to spend 20 hours learning something. Like, right. Like I'm investing in a program, and this is how I view things. I'm investing in a program to get the shortcut, to get the cheat codes, like save me. Like I give money to people who save me time, right? Because it took me hours, like hundreds of hours to actually learn this stuff. But that's the whole premise of it. And it's a way to also just like modernize dental education. Like we don't need to be flying. Like you don't need to fly anywhere to learn how to do this procedure. Like the whole procedure is hands off. Like, the most clinically significant part is doing the interproximal reduction, which, if you can do a filling, you can do aligners. Like, if anything, fillings are probably more technically complex with the hands, but sorry, went on a tangent there, but yeah, that's the program. For me, my day to day, I am, my days consist of planning and creating content for the YouTube channel. Because I'm treating YouTube as its own business. So we have different strategies that we're trying to figure out and implement there. I answer support questions to the docs in the program. I also do a lot of like focus on marketing. So, we run Facebook ads. So I will, analyze those, try to come up with new creative, a lot of the ways that I like to, and then I also focus on growth, right? So jumping on podcasts, connecting with people on calls, just seeing how, like a plan for 2024 is to see how we can, grow from like a collaboration standpoint. So whether that is, collaborating with other docs, hopping on webinars, doing stuff like that, just getting in front of more dentists is the goal. So, yeah, it's sometimes it can feel like not that I'm not doing anything. It's just, that question is great. It like, oh, what do you do? Like, even for me, sometimes I'm like, what do I do? And I actually just started tracking what I do every 15 minutes. Okay. It's like an exercise just so you can see where your time is going. And so I was doing that yesterday and I did it today. And it goes to show, like, I'm working on a webinar collab with another doc. And I mean, I spent like 2.5 hours on it yesterday, and I spent even more time today. So it's, when you track what you do with your time, it's kind of nuts.
It's funny because I highly doubt, young Avi, when he's like 17 years old, wants to become a dentist, thought he'd be making content for a living, which is really funny.
Not a chance.
Yeah, not a chance. He's probably like, what are you talking about? But I love that for you.
25-year-old Avi, 25-year-old Avi wouldn't do it either. My mom told me, dude, when I graduated, she's like, you need to start doing these dances. And I was like, what? No, I'm not doing that.
Hold on, your mom told you to start making content?
Back in when I graduated, 2018, there was a dentist. He was like a younger dentist, and he did some, whatever. It was before TikTok. It was like on Facebook. Okay. People would like, whatever. I guess the first, technically, right, trend came out on Facebook, and she's like, you should do this. She's like, this is you. She's like, you have a personality, you should do it. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not doing that. That's not what I do. I'm a dentist now. I don't do that. Yeah. And 5 years later, I'm pretty deep in the social media game, so it's nuts.
Moms are honestly just always right. It's a little bit annoying. I've learned that also applies to wives. So my mom and my wife are just like, everything they say, it's so annoying. They're just always right. In hindsight.
Always. Always
pisses me off. But that's crazy that nowadays, most of your time is spent making content, working on the business, whether that is scaling for 2024, doing collabs, getting in front of more dentists, maybe doing some sort of affiliate programs and that kind of thing, I would assume. But I do really like that your course is independent, because I'm sure obviously Invisalign has their own CE courses, but you're kind of being like a broker to a degree of like, hey, I've taken all these other courses. Let me funnel it down for you and tell you my unbiased opinion, not because I work for one of these companies, just, hey, here's what I would do as a dentist. And I think that probably really resonates with any young dentists who want to learn this stuff. But coming back to your courses, you have that initial course for anyone who wants to learn like A to Z aligner work. Is there any course that you have right now, or maybe coming up in the future, where let's say someone's already doing aligner work and they just want to get, even more specialized, or they want to do more complex cases? Is that going to be a resource you're going to have in the future? Or what happens in that kind of situation? Let's say I'm a dentist who's already doing aligner work, but I still want to get better at it.
Yep. So, I think with that, it's funny you say that, because I brainstormed that, right? Because it's like, okay, what's after this, right? What can you offer? And so for me, I think what I've learned is I want to wait for people to ask, because there's two ways to go about it, right? With aligners, there's a clinical component and there's a business component. So you can either do more cases, like types of cases, right? And go more complex, go down that route, which is an option. I don't necessarily think it's a good one, though, because if you are truly trying to create more freedom in your life, and if that's the model that you're holding, you're going to want to probably tighten up the business side. And with aligners, there is, like, you can look at it as its own specialty in itself in terms of how you run the business. And these practices that are crushing it, it's not because they're taking every case that comes through the door. It's because they're taking very specific cases that are treatable. They're efficient, right? 6 to 8 months of treatment. And they create basically a business within their business. So, and it starts with the marketing, right? When you are targeting somebody to come into your doors with an Invisalign ad or aligner ad, whatever it is, they're coming for a specific reason. They're not coming because you have this CEREC machine and 3D printing. They're coming because you're offering this aligner treatment. And so it's like if you actually spend that time, and there's companies out there that specialize in this stuff, and they can teach you how to create a business within your business with aligners and scale it. I think there's a doctor in Canada, she does it, where docs now are creating these they have this business within their business, but some of them are also generating so much revenue from it. They're going and creating aligner only practices, which is nuts. Like, you would just go as a patient, you show up, you're getting treatment. And what it is it's cool because it's taking, like, so Smile Direct Club and Candid and all of them, like, they hit the scene and they really like blew up the industry. And I think if you take note at what they did a lot of innovative things. But if dentists are open-minded enough to replicate some of the things they did and just have a little bit more of a watchful eye on it, it can be super successful. So that being said,
you have to learn from your competitors.
But if people ask for more complex stuff, I would definitely probably start reaching out to orthodontists. I have a couple who have actually reached out to me and said that they would be willing to support me, and maybe creating an advanced program. But I also think there's a lot of value in trying to also get these docs to start looking at their practice and growing the actual business of the aligners, as opposed to just doing complex stuff.
Fair enough. I see what you mean, because there's more to learn just doing the basics, because the basics is I'm a sports guy as well. So I always tell my clients that the top dentists I know are great on the court and off the court. Like Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan because he was amazing on the court and off the court. But as a dentist, you also have to be amazing inside the operatory and then kind of outside the operatory. And so what I'm hearing from you is, yes, you have to understand the basics of these aligners. That's inside the operatory. Then there's outside the operatory, there's a whole business about aligners that you could really blow up. And so maybe you're going to start there instead of the, hey, more complex stuff, more operatory stuff. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the future of dentistry, because you don't obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but everything you've made so far in terms of your content, it like hit the nail on the head, and I could see why your audience is growing so much, because you talked about so much stuff that I hear clients complain about every single day. About, you're working as an associate, the principal's taking all the big cases, you're doing all the small stuff, taking massive loans, paying it all back, and it takes you till you're 40 to actually start living your life. Dentist insurance costs not increasing, and then your billables increasing. So you're like, all right, insurance is not matching inflation, is not matching, the stuff that we're actually billing, and then going into collecting the actual billables, and then even that perfectionist culture. So like, you really obviously understand dentistry because you're working in it, and everyone around you is sort of resonating with all the messaging that you have. Even me, who's like not in dentistry, I'm like dentistry adjacent. I'm like, oh man, this guy really knows this stuff. But I don't want to speak for you, but with a lot of the stuff, I know you rant about dentistry, but deep down, I know you definitely love it because you wouldn't be doing this still. So where do you see the future of dentistry going with respect to all these issues that are coming up, with the cost of things increasing, with inflation going up, with student loans not coming down? Cost of education is actually going up. So these loans are just getting bigger and bigger. So for a young dentist who still wants to go into dentistry, what advice do you have for that generation of what they should be doing?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a divide in the sense of, I think there's going to be people who just continue to do what's been done in the industry for years, which is your basic, your bread and butter, and not really changing the status quo. I don't know how successful they're going to be long term. I think they're going to struggle because that's just the name of the game with all the variables that you mentioned. But the ones who who continue to learn and continue to look and see what is working and then do more of that, I think those people are going to innovate, and those people are going to be very successful, because the industry is not going to like go away. Like, people have teeth, and people have things that are wrong with their teeth, and they're going to have to pay somebody to do something about it, right? Like, that is there. It's always going to be there. But now it's kind of like you have to get a little more creative about how you're going to be successful in the field, right? And there's so many ways. For me, one of the things that I like to hang I also just think, and again, I'm biased because this is the route that I ended up going down, but I think what the industry actually needs more of is this path of more people sharing, more people creating, right? You're already seeing it. There's more dentists kind of getting on social media, and yes, a lot of people are doing it for the patients, but it'd be cool to see more dentists sharing their stories and their perspectives and how they've, gotten to where they're at. I also think there needs to be more courses for dentists, teaching the basics. There's so many ways that people have found success. And before social media, there were only a select few people who got the opportunity to be on a stage and then create a program. And then, dentists would have to find out about those through these archaic channels, where now my opinion is, for me, I'm who am I? I'm nobody special. I'm a guy who went to dental school, graduated. I went into the industry. I had some challenges. I overcame them. And then I was willing to turn around and teach people how to avoid those challenges. And that's how you move an industry forward, right? I am trying to make aligner education more accessible to people who are really serious about doing it. And that is just one micro niche. There are so many others. You've got your implants, your patient communication, your team, leadership, all these things. You don't need to be in the profession for 20 years. I'm only 5 years into the field, and you know what I mean? And I just think there's also the darkness of the first 5 years out, and how there's not enough resources to serve those dentists coming out from mentorship and education. It's tough. So it's to me, that's also opportunity. So So one thing that I say is I think the future of dentistry is going to be more people creating programs, which is then going to allow that individual to not only give to the industry and move it forward, it's also going to give them, some side income. And that is going to also help, liberate them and give them that optionality to practice dentistry. Dentistry won't be a field. And I think it's good because I think if you have more dentists who are practicing dentistry because they want to, not because they have to, everybody wins.
Yep. I couldn't agree more with you on that point, because there's a lot of clients I have who want to do dentistry part-time. They still love it. But at the end of the day, dentistry is a physically demanding job. It is highly stressful. You can't really turn off your brain because you're still thinking about cases when you go home. And I would love for them to be able to do dentistry 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever that number is for them. And in their spare time, maybe talk to other dentists and teach them how to do things. Because there's so many people that I know who are amazing at their craft. Like they're renowned inside their industry, but you can't understand their brain or their knowledge or how they go about procedures unless you're physically there with them. And I was like, you're kind of like robbing dentists around the world of this knowledge that you have by not creating it. And it's a win-win. You're able to teach these dentists around the world how you do things, and maybe you can make some money by doing so and work less or extend your career. And
Agreed.
The more people that learn this information, the standard of care that gets passed on to the patient is going to be that much higher. And so like it literally is a win-win-win across the board. So I couldn't agree more with your message right there.
Yeah, man, totally.
What I wanted to talk about now was kind of like our standard. Me and Ricky, who's my co-host, he's not here today, and sometimes him and I just, our schedules don't line up, but me and him are still working on exactly what like our big 3 questions are going to be. We have a list, but the ones I chose for you really is number 1, what's the best piece of advice you think you've ever received? And we're going to omit mom telling you to make content in 2018 because she is a trendsetter, that woman.
Yeah. No, she definitely is. So the best piece of advice, stay focused on one thing. Stay focused on one thing and continue to do it. Because I forget the exact piece of advice, but the way I'm relaying that is like, for me, once I put this like entrepreneur hat on, I wanted to just create. I saw so many problems and I saw solutions, and I just wanted to create solutions and businesses and all that. But it's like the more that you do that, the more you get distracted from what you can actually do and accomplish. And part of the reason why I've been able to grow the business the way that I have is because I only focused on the business. And the same thing can go for dentistry. Like if you're a dentist and you want to learn how to do a procedure, don't go take 5 courses at once. Take one. Pick one. You want to do implants? Go take implant courses. Take one and go implement it and focus and learn and continue to do it. You want to do aligners? Get in one program and focus on it and keep doing it. Because when you do that, you will troubleshoot so much faster, right? You're more agile, you're in it. And that's how I learned how to do aligners, but also growing this business and all the hurdles that come with it. That's how I've been able to stay focused on it and really push it forward. So yeah, stay focused on one thing and don't get distracted and don't give in to the temptation of other things is the fastest way to grow. That's the advice.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think there is a lot of power in saying no, or having the ability to say no rather than saying yes to every opportunity, because you kind of shoot yourself in the foot when you start saying yes to everything and then you end up not actually actioning the stuff that you were supposed to in the first place. So I'm sure you've seen that firsthand. So I like that answer a lot. My next question was going to be, do you have like a favorite quote or mantra that you live by? Because there's so much cool stuff out there, like on Instagram and books these days. But is there anything that you consistently find yourself going back to, whether that be a quote, a mantra, a saying, or a way of thinking?
Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah,
that's mine. Everything happens for a reason. High level, I had all those associateships because it gave me a lot of perspective on the industry very quickly. And it allowed me to have the confidence to go and share this message, right? Part of the reason why I'm comfortable sharing the messages that I share is because I've been in so many offices and I've seen so many similarities that I know that I'm not alone. This is like a common theme. So yeah, everything happens for a reason. And they didn't let me, if the first doctor let me do aligners in that practice, I would not be here today.
Yeah. Your message wouldn't resonate the way it does right now. Because you'd be the aligner guy. Like I said, you'd do a couple cases and maybe you'd end up here, but in a different way. Maybe you'd be like, hey, I'm going to start doing extractions or whatever the case is because I'm bored of aligners. But it absolutely does happen for a reason. Last question that I wanted to ask you is, what's something that you've done either professionally or personally that you recommend everyone try at least once in their life?
Do a cold plunge. I think everyone should try to do a cold plunge. Those are great. I love them.
I did my first one this weekend, and it was great. It felt really good, and I was lucky enough to be at like a spa, so we did the cold plunge and then the hot and then the sauna and then sort of rinse and repeat.
Perfect.
My wife didn't do it
with
me,
the best.
It was it was quite. The feeling was amazing after when you finish up.
And it just feels cool. It's like you did something hard and you didn't die, and you can do it again.
That was literally, as I was in the cold plunge, I was like, just breathe. You're not going to die. You'll be fine. That was literally what was going through my head as I was sitting there.
That's it.
It's
That's
really nice.
funny.
I've actually thought about getting like a cold plunge for the house now because I was like, all right, this is something I need to implement to my routine. Just one last question before we leave, and that really is just, we've kind of sprinkled this throughout the episode, but do you have any advice to your fellow dentists out there, whether they're brand new and they just started practicing, or whether they're, riding off into the sunset and they're looking to sell their practice soon? What advice would you have for any dentists out there who are hearing this?
Yeah, I would just say, just because you can't see someone who's done it does not mean it's impossible. I think that's my advice, and that can be applied to anything. Take that and just double up on it. Just, don't be afraid to try something new. I think if you can run with both of those, I think you can have you'll be doing good stuff in the world.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a perfect place to end it. Honestly, thank you, Avi, for taking the time and being on here. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate you taking the hour, spending the time with me. Where is the best place to reach you and go and check out your course if someone's interested?
Yeah. So easiest place to reach me is on Instagram. Just shoot me a DM. It's dr.avi. And then the program itself, I have a link in the bio there. But if not, you can just search Aligner Launchpad on Google, and it should show up as like the first link. I've been working on that SEO.
I'll have both of those inside the show notes to this, as well as all your different social media platforms and your link tree. So if someone is listening to this at the gym or whatever, they can just go into the show notes and everything will be there for them.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Avi. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this.
And there you have it, episode 5 of the Dental Journeys podcast with Dr. Avi Patel. Now, if you'd like to connect to Dr. Patel, I've included his links to his social media, YouTube, and website in the show notes of this podcast episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Dental Journeys podcast, proudly sponsored by White Coat Financial. Join us next time as we continue to explore the journeys, strategies, and successes of dental professionals across Canada.